What are the keys to a West Virginia victory this Saturday against Penn State? What matchups do we need to be looking out for? What players do we need to be looking out for? And who wins the game? And what will the final score be? That's what my partner Jonathan Martin and I are going to talk about on this episode of the Gold and Blue Breakdown here on Couz's Corner. Jonathan, how are you doing tonight?
Couz, I'm excited, man. I'm excited. Right around the corner, days away at this point. We'll dive into this. Arguably the biggest home opener in a long time. I'm fired up, man. I'm ready to get it.
Me too. All right. Let's just jump right in, man. Well, first off, before we do dive in, let me give a shout out to our sponsor real quick. Can't forget about that. So let me do that, and then we'll dive right in. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. So, Jonathan, let's just dive right in, man. Let's just start off. We're going to do a series. This is what we're going to do each week. We're going to do what we call 3-2-1. We're going to do 3 keys to the game, 2 position battles to watch, and 1 player to watch for the Mountaineers. So let's start off, Jonathan. I'll start with you, man. What are your 3 keys to the game for West Virginia for them to come out on top?
Yeah, so I don't know how you want to break them down. I don't know if you want to do me one, you one, how you want to do it. But I'll say first off, I think for West Virginia, you have to establish the run game. Obviously, West Virginia has the 2-headed monster in the backfield, Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson. It's the kind of the battle of the strengths of both teams. Penn State feels really good about their defensive line, their entire defensive unit. West Virginia feels really good about the rushing attack. So for me, I think you have to establish the run game, and you have to establish it early. So I think that's exactly going into the game. That's one key to watch for me is can West Virginia get the run game going early like they did last season?
Okay. I like it. We'll go back and forth. I think that's I just prefer to do it that way. All right. Because number one, I can't sit still and not talk for that long of a period of time. Okay.
That's kind of what I mean.
You can be honest, Jonathan. I don't care. I like to talk. That's why all of my videos. I had a guy comment on a video today. He said, "Man, I'm glad you kept this one under 20 minutes." I was like, "That's hard for me to do, man."
Well, what they don't know, Couz, is we had a whole episode off air before we started. So
yeah, we did. Good grief. Jonathan and I are talking, and we're so into it. I'm like, man, we got to hit the record button. But anyway.
Yep.
All right. My first key is I think West Virginia, and it's on the defensive side, I think West Virginia needs to force turnovers. West Virginia, for whatever reason, I've just had in my head for the last couple of weeks, 2 turnovers is the number to me. I think West Virginia needs 2 turnovers in this game, if possible, to try to steal some possessions from Penn State, to help control the clock. And I think that gives them a much better chance. I mean, obviously, it always gives you a better chance to win. But in this game, when you're playing a team that on paper is more talented than us or than you are, I think stealing possessions is critical. And I think that's something that West Virginia needs to do to win this game. And the magic number for me is at least 2 turnovers. Win the turnover battle by at least 2 to have a chance.
Yeah, and you're going to have opportunities. Penn State threw the football almost 30 times last season. It'll be interesting to see if that's kind of their attack this year. They feel good about their run game too. New offensive coordinator. Curious to see if they throw the ball 30 times. I think it was 29, almost 30 times last year. So I'll be curious to see if that's the plan. And if so, you're going to get that West Virginia secondary going to get tested early. And so I agree with you. The turnover battle is always huge. And against a team like Penn State, top 10 at home, who I think we both agree is probably not going to make a ton of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Going to hurt themselves a ton. Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. Have to get some turnovers, and you can't give them the ball. You can't fumble the ball. Interceptions. Garrett's got to be smart. So yeah, great point. You've got to win that. Got to win that battle.
All right. What is your second key?
Yeah, so we kind of just touched on it. For me, it's containing Drew Allar, quarterback, Penn State. He played well last year. I mean, completed almost 70% of his passes, 325 yards, 3 touchdowns. Now, I'll get it. He lost some weapons off of last year's team. We were kind of discussing off air that if Penn State does have a weakness, it could be at receiver. And West Virginia has an all-new secondary. We broke that down on this show before.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what West Virginia is going to do is they're going to make him beat them. I think they're going to trust the secondary a little bit out of the gate, and I think they're going to look to shut down Penn State's running game. And if that's the case, you have to contain him. You have to control him. I don't know that he can throw for 300, almost 330 yards again, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and you upset Penn State at home. So I think you have to contain him.
I like it. I 100% agree with that take. They weren't able to do it a year ago, but I'm much more comfortable with this group this year than the ones we had last year. I talked about that in a video a couple of days ago. I really, at least on paper, are more talented at that position going into this game than we were last year. So I like the chances, but again, they got to prove it on the field. All right, my second key is win the field position battle. West Virginia, just like we talked about, stealing possessions, not giving up possessions. I think, and by winning field position, you got to win the special teams game, in my opinion. We need Ollie Straw to have a good game. We need the punt and kick return teams to have good games. And you need your defense to get off the field. 3 and outs, force them to punt deep, all those types of things. You need to force Penn State to go the length of the field as much as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And like you said, if they're able to control Drew Allar, that forces them to run the ball. And we know Penn State can run it, but if you make them go the length of the field, it's harder to do that, right? So I think that's key is winning the field position battle. And it's just, Coach Brown talks about all the time, we have to win in the margins.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those margins is field position.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And I didn't have this listed, but listening to you talk kind of plays into that. You have to take advantage of getting Penn State this year at home. And part of that is feeding off of the crowd. And we know that's sold out. Mountaineer Nation's going to be ready. I didn't write this down, but it kind of plays into what you were talking about. When you get Penn State in a position of 3rd and long, you've got to get off the field. It seemed like several times last year, if there was a struggle there, it was the 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 12, and you gave up those first downs. You have to get Penn State off the field, especially in 3rd and long when that crowd's rocking. You got to take advantage of that.
Agreed. All right. Key number 3, Jonathan. What you got?
Yeah, so for me, we talked about containing Drew Allar, and we talked about Penn State's rushing attack. A lot of attention's been paid to West Virginia for their running game. Penn State's not too bad either. Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen, 1,600 yards between both of them, 16, 17 touchdowns, I believe it was last year. They feel really good about their offensive line. We may disagree a little bit here on West Virginia's defensive line. I'm a little concerned about the depth for West Virginia there. And so I talked earlier, West Virginia need to establish the run game. I think the same can be said for Penn State. And so I think you have to control both running backs for Penn State. If you can keep them in that 80 to 90, under 100 rushing yards, which is going to be tough, and you can force them into passing downs, I feel like you feel better about your chances, but I think you have to control Penn State's rushing game and keep them in check.
Yeah. And if you can force Drew Allar to throw it, and you mentioned controlling Drew Allar earlier, that's how you do that. You force him into passing situations and you pull your ears back and go after him, right? And hopefully get him on the ground a couple of times. He didn't get sacked. He don't get sacked a lot.
No.
And he doesn't turn it over. He and Garrett Green are a lot. There's some similarities between he and Garrett Green in that regard. Neither one of them turn it over much. At least they didn't a year ago. And neither one of them, they both protect the ball and neither of them got sacked a lot. So those two areas are very similar. So it's going to be a very fun game to watch there, and from that regard.
Yeah.
My third key, and this is I might be getting into the weeds a little bit here, but my key to me is West Virginia's offensive line, especially the right side of the line, and how well they handle that Penn State defensive line, and because that Penn State D line is stacked, okay?
Yeah.
And I mean, the one guy that stands out, obviously, you got Abdul Carter there, who I may touch on later, little tease, but they got a defensive end named Dennis Sutton. And he had 26 tackles a year ago, 3.5 sacks, and 6 TFLs. Very talented player. Played every game last year. He concerns me a little bit. And I think West Virginia is going to have to lean on Traylon Davis in this game to be an extra blocker. And I think the running backs are going to have to do a good job blocking in the pass game as well, because that Penn State D line is just really, really, really good. They might be elite. It's going to be the best defense that West Virginia plays this year, in my opinion. And I don't even know if it's arguable, to be honest. But I think Traylon Davis, that extra blocker, is going to be important, or whatever other tight ends in the game. Even Cole Taylor could fall into that category. And then also the running backs are going to have to help out too. And scheme. How does West Virginia scheme up to if there are weaknesses on West Virginia's offensive line, how does West Virginia scheme around that against a team like Penn State, who doesn't have a whole lot of weaknesses? That's going to be something to watch too, and that's a key for me.
Yeah, scheme. You took the words right out of my mouth. Be curious to see how West Virginia prepares for that defense, because, like you said, they were. I know they lost a lot of guys last year, the NFL, but they reloaded. And last year they were top 10 in just about every measurable category, and have a lot of talent back. So we'll be interesting to see how West Virginia – I don't know that you're going to be able to just ground and pound it, right? So be curious how they do the tight ends. You almost have to kind of spread them out. West Virginia has athletes on the offensive side of the ball. So be curious to see how Coach Brown, Coach Scott – work this offense again against a team that doesn't have a lot of weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball, and they are good.
Yeah, I expect to see a lot of 12 personnel in this game with Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis both in the game, which means you can only have 3 receivers, right? So I think that's the formation we'll see probably the most in the game, because I just think they're going to need as many blockers as possible. To help protect Garrett and help create lanes in the running game as well.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Now, the next segment is and by the way, in future shows every week, we're going to start every show with a kind of a recap of the previous game, but obviously, this being week 1, we don't have a previous game to discuss. So, next week and on, we will be able to do that. But we'll just do a short segment probably on a kind of a quick recap. Now let's talk about position battles, Jonathan. What are the the first position battle rather that you have on your radar in this game?
Yeah, so we've already kind of touched on it. For me, it's in the trenches. West Virginia offensive line, Penn State defensive line. It is an area where both coaching staffs feel pretty good about that area. Let's not dismiss the fact that West Virginia lost a lot up front with Zach Frazier and Doug Nestor, but they return 113 career starts. So they're not throwing out a bunch of true freshmen. These guys know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so if we do think the scheme is what you had just discussed, where you see a lot of that 2 tight end blocking personnel in there for West Virginia, that offensive line versus an extremely talented defensive line, which really goes back to what I said earlier about establishing the run game. And so it's good old-fashioned with all the athletes on the field, good old-fashioned battle of the trenches. And the team that can make their mark and solidify themselves as a stronger unit in this game Saturday, I think we'll have a more likelihood of winning the game.
That's fair, and I can't disagree with you on that because you're absolutely right. You talked about the West Virginia, offensive line losing 2 guys, and don't forget Penn State's offensive line they lost 3 guys to the pros themselves too. So both of these offensive lines are replacing a lot of talent. But just like West Virginia, Penn State's bringing their replacements have played a lot of snaps.
Yeah.
So again, similarity there as far as, replacing. You're not replacing them with a bunch of young guys. Now, Penn State does have one redshirt freshman offensive lineman that is probably going to see time in this game, but he's extremely talented. So, like you said earlier, they just reload, right? They don't rebuild.
Yeah.
My first position to watch is along those lines, but I'm focusing more on Abdul Carter here. Abdul Carter I was listening to a Penn State episode. I don't remember. I've listened to a bunch this week, but I was listening to one Penn State podcast or maybe reading an article. Some people are expecting Abdul Carter to play both linebacker and defensive end in this game because of some injuries, I guess, they've encountered during fall camp. But, man, that means they're going to be moving him around all over the place. West Virginia's offensive line is going to have to keep track of where he's at all times. And I expect them to try to exploit West Virginia's weaknesses on the offensive line, wherever they might be, which to me is probably going to be the right side. West Virginia's strength of their offensive line has been the left side, and it's been that way. It was like that last year as well.
Yeah.
It's no secret. But they're going to probably try to exploit that, and that's why I think Traylon Davis, back to my earlier comment about Traylon Davis. But Abdul Carter, where he lines up, I had mentioned in a previous show that I would like, the battle between him and Wyatt Milam would be interesting. But I'm not sure he'll be going against Wyatt Milam that much because I think they'll try to put him against somebody else.
Yeah.
Potentially. Now, I could be wrong. They might just say, okay, we're going to put our best man on your best man and see who wins. They may do that. I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see. But I'm interested in Abdul Carter up against this West Virginia offensive line, see if they can keep track of him and see if they're able to keep him out of the backfield.
Yeah, the word is they're going to move him around. Almost 50 tackles last year. I mean, he can play multiple positions, and they are going to move him around. So it'll be interesting to see when you talk scheme how they move him around, where they line him up, and it could be that they put him in, like you said, at multiple positions to not get him, just kind of work him around and test a couple different players on that West Virginia offensive line. So be curious to see how they do it. But I think West Virginia you lost a lot, but you returned some experience too. And whether it be the offensive line or Traylon Davis or Cole Taylor, I think you've got to establish that part of the game if you want to have some success Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Agree. So what's your second? Oh, by the way, before we move on, you were talking about Abdul Carter's stats. Here's his stat line from last year.
Oh.
48 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 1 interception, 5 pass breakups, 5 QB hurries, and a forced fumble.
He just had to get that interception.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing he can't do.
Yeah, he's good.
So
he's good. He's good.
What is your second position battle there?
Yeah, so Couz, if anybody's followed the show, I love some special teams. You know it. I love some special teams. But I said last week, I think West Virginia is going to be in every game this year. When I look at the schedule, whether it be Big 12 or whether it be Penn State at home, I think West Virginia this year is just as equally talented as the team that they're going to face. So you had 3 games last year, arguably 4, that came down to special teams plays. And I think that's going to be a huge factor this year. So if you're West Virginia, I think you got to win the special teams battle. Michael Hayes is talented, 17 of 21 last year. I think you feel pretty comfortable when he comes out there, especially in that 40 to 45-yard range. Oliver Straw punting the ball, field position. We discussed that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Austin Brinkman at long snapper. Don't underestimate him or don't undervalue him either. Right. That's important. Penn State, on the other hand, while they feel good about their punter, they're replacing an all Big Ten kicker, and they do have a backup that's unproven. They do have a transfer from Tulsa, I believe, and they're working those guys. Now, they could have, full disclosure, could have named a starter. I haven't seen that, but that seems to be a work in progress and a little bit untested and unproven. West Virginia is not. So I think this game, and we'll discuss this when it comes down to our predictions and the final score, I think this is going to be a special teams type game where West Virginia may have to settle against a strong defense for Penn State, may have to settle for a field goal, may have to play the field position game. So I think a key position matchup or battle for me would be special teams, because I love special teams of both Penn State and West Virginia.
Yeah. I get some flack sometimes on my channel on my show here for not talking about special teams enough. By gosh, my partner Jonathan Martin is going to cover it for me. I don't have to.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. I've got the special teams guru. Man, that is some cool stuff. That's a deep dive. I like it.
Yeah, I'm not kicking the ball. Don't ask me to kick the ball, but I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it, but I'm not kicking one.
Hey, I tried kicking in high school. It's hard. I was out in gym class. I went out on a field and was kicking field goals, and I was like, man, I'm pretty good at this, right? Well, my football coach happens to see me. He says, "We're gonna let you try it practice." Not so fast, my friend. When you got people running at you trying to block it, whole different ball game, man. So I had a bigger respect for kickers after that. But anyway,
I just feel good about I feel good about where West Virginia. I feel good about how West Virginia feels good, if that makes sense, about their special teams. And I'm not even really getting into punt returners, kick returners. We could talk about that too. And I believe West Virginia will be strong there, but never undervalue a good long snapper, and West Virginia has one. And punter, kicker, they feel really good about that. And Penn State may be okay with what they have there, but it's a work in progress. And they lost a lot last year. So be curious to see if this comes down, which again, not to tease it when we get into predictions. I think it could matter.
And don't forget, Penn State also has a new special teams coordinator this year, along with the new offensive and defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
That doesn't get talked about enough either. Everybody talks about the D coordinators and the O coordinators, but that special teams coordinator is important too.
Yep.
All right, my second position battle to watch is West Virginia's receivers, who are under the radar, we'll say, and Penn State secondary. Penn State has a very talented secondary. They brought in a couple transfers that are supposed to be really good. One from Florida, one from Georgia. Their names are, got my notes here. Their names are Jalen Kimber and AJ Harris. Very good. They also have a very talented safety named KJ Winston, who put up massive numbers a year ago to go along with some other guys. But very good secondary. In West Virginia, get two sophomores in Gallagher and Ray. We have redshirt sophomore in Hudson Clement. Still fairly young at that spot. They did bring in Jaden Bray, obviously, and Justin Robinson, two older guys from the portal. And they got Preston Fox, who's had a really good fall camp. He's a senior, I believe. So can they get separation against that talented Penn State secondary? Because I think it's a pretty safe bet that Penn State's going to try to force West Virginia to throw the football.
Yeah.
Because they know West Virginia wants to run the football, right? So can Garrett Green, will he have receivers to throw it to? Can they get open so that he can throw it to them? Or is he going to be forced to throw the ball into coverage all night? And are these receivers going to be forced to make tough catches all night? Not saying they can't do that, but it's much harder. And I think it's going to be, they're going to have to win some one-on-ones on the outside and get open and win some of those battles in order to succeed in the passing game, to loosen that box up.
Yep.
So that you can let Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson cook.
Yeah.
So that's a key battle for me.
I agree, and that's why kind of piggybacking off of that, my number one key is for West Virginia to establish the run game.
Yeah.
Because I do think Penn State is going to force Garrett Green to throw the football, throw it downfield.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, got to establish that run game. You could even make an argument Cole Taylor over the middle. So, yeah, I completely agree. That's a huge position battle. A.J. Harris, by the way, for Penn State, played 7 games, a 4-star kid, played 7 games as a freshman for Georgia. If you go to Georgia and play 7 games as a freshman,
you're pretty good.
You're pretty good. So, yeah they're going to be tested for sure.
Yeah. All right. Next segment. One player to watch for West Virginia in this game. Now, it was hard for me to pick just one, but I did. But I'm going to let you go first, and you tell me who's your one player to watch. And please don't say Michael Hayes or Oliver Straw.
Yeah. Well, okay. I guess I got to – do we have a – can we go to a commercial break? No, I'm just kidding.
No. You're welcome to say whoever you want to say, Jonathan.
Yeah, so the odds of me and you getting this right are the same, are pretty good because, again, I hate to reiterate it, but we don't discuss notes or share notes.
Nope.
It seems like we're usually thinking the same thing. So I put a question out. I kind of had my mind made up, but I put a question out on Twitter, X, the other day, and I said, give me a player not named Garrett Green who you think would make an impact this Saturday. And there were a lot of people that were mentioned, offense, defense. Yes, there was a special teams player mentioned. I gave that the like. But the one player who kept coming back more and more and more and more was actually the player that I thought, Jaheim White. Because I think West Virginia is going to try and establish that run game, and I think they're going to try and get him out open in space a little bit more because Penn State is really good up the middle at the tackle position. I think Jaheim is destined to have a huge, huge game. And also, I'm not so sure they won't get him involved a little bit in the passing route, too. We saw that last year at Central Florida several times on the wheel route. So whether it be running the ball or catching the football, really excited to see him, and I think Jaheim has a breakout game. He came on late last season, and I think that carries over to this Saturday.
Yeah, and one thing that, a lot of people have not mentioned is, and I've mentioned it, I think I mentioned it on earlier shows, but anyway, I haven't heard it talked about a lot, is the fact that Jaheim White didn't play in this game like a year ago.
Yeah.
So
and that's hard to believe.
It is. And so Penn State, now I'm sure they've seen film and they have good coaches, so they know how to prepare. But seeing it on the field, now look, I know what Penn State fans I can see it in my head right now. I've got a Penn State fan typing as we speak. We've played against Ohio State and they have blah blah blah. I get it, okay? You're in the God conference. You're in the Big Ten. I get it. Okay, the gods of football. Okay, you don't have to come at me. Jaheim White is as good as any of those people, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm a blue and gold glasses wearing guy, but I would put Jaheim White up against any running back in the country. And they haven't seen him yet, so I think there's a little bit of an advantage there. So I'd agree with that pick. But here's the one I want to say, Jonathan.
Oh boy!
And it kind of it's amazing how everything ties together. I talked about the receivers. Can they get separation? But if they can't, what's your second, third, fourth option? Cole Taylor.
Yeah.
I think Cole Taylor. I think this is set up for where Cole Taylor could potentially have a really big game. If West Virginia is not able to run the football the way they want to and they have to throw it, and those receivers aren't able to get separation, I think Cole Taylor can, because he has, as Neil Brown calls it, he's open by birth. He's a 6'7" tight end. He's big, and I think he's going to be able to catch balls across the middle, out in the flat, wherever. And anytime West Virginia gets in trouble, They can go to him even in the red zone, which they've been working on very hard this offseason to try and improve their red zone scoring. I think Cole Taylor could be the X factor for this West Virginia offense in this game, and which could potentially, loosen that box a little bit, like we talked about earlier, and help in the run game. So anyway, Jaheim White, Cole Taylor, I'd be okay with both of those guys. Have great games.
Yeah, and the truth is, we could name. We could just rattle any name, right? I mean, I feel it got me thinking when you said Penn State's not seen Jaheim White. He didn't play in that game, which, I mean, it's one of those where I knew that, but when you said it, it just kind of hit you, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
Okay. But then it also kind of goes, and I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole here, but then it goes back to how much more experience does Garrett Green have? C.J. Donaldson, Cole Taylor, Hudson Clement, Preston Fox. I mean, we could just go on and on and on in the skill position. And let's not forget, the final score kind of got away from West Virginia last year. It was a 7-7 football game in the second quarter on the road.
Very true.
And a lot of weapons coming back for West Virginia. So I agree. I think a 6'7" tight end could be a quarterback's best friend, and so you can't go wrong with picking Cole Taylor. Can't go wrong.
All right, Jonathan. So we got the 3 keys to the game. We got the 2 position battles. We got the player to watch. Now, what's next? Score prediction.
Yep. So West Virginia was 5-1 at home last season. 5-1. Should have been 6-0. Let's just call it what it is. I just said West Virginia was in that football game last year against Penn State on the road more than that final score said. So for me, I think with West Virginia returning everything that they're returning, and I'm not shocking anybody here. I said a month ago when the schedule first, well, we knew the game was coming, but when we sat down and just really thought about it, saw what West Virginia had coming back, I felt good. I think West Virginia gets it done 28-24 because I think they establish the run game, and I think they do just enough defensively to stop Penn State's run and contain Drew Allar. I think West Virginia gets it done 28-24.
I chuckled because
don't tell me.
Vegas has the line set at 51.5. Our good friends over at BetUS, 51.5 is the over-under. You said 52, 28-24. Now you have West Virginia winning. Yeah. My final score is very close to 51.5 as well. I have the final score is 27-24. Except, go ahead, West Virginia fans, throw tomatoes at me. Whatever you want to throw at me. I got West Virginia losing the game 27-24. I just think it's if you remember in our preseason prediction, I picked West Virginia to lose the game. I reserve the right to change my mind, but I just every time I sit down to do a video and I have to research this Penn State team, I get more nervous.
Yeah.
Because I see how friggin' talented they are. And it's going to take West Virginia's A game to win. Not saying they can't bring their A game, but this Penn State team to me, I mean, Phil Steele says he thinks they might have a chance to go undefeated and play for a national championship. That's how high he is on them. And Phil Steele's about as accurate as anybody in the business.
Yeah.
And when I look at that defense, man, I think West Virginia's going to struggle to move the ball on them. And I just don't think they're going to be able to generate enough points to win. I think West Virginia's going to have a good team this year. But I just think Penn State's going to be too much. But I asked the fans, if West Virginia does lose the game, it's not the end of the world here, okay? No. They still have a Big 12 conference to play. They still can win a Big 12 title, and they can still make the college football playoff. So I don't want us to all get, crazy mad or something if West Virginia loses the game, especially if it's close.
Yeah.
But
well, I guess I'll jump in the fire with you. I think West Virginia wins the game. but I don't think that it's a I don't think many people should get too upset that you predicted a 3-point loss to the number 8 team in the country.
Yeah.
It's Penn State, not Pitt. So, I think at some point you have to tip your hat to the other team. I, like you, have done a ton of research on Penn State. They are a great football team. I mean, at every position, it's hard to find a weakness. I feel like West Virginia, with what they have coming back last season, I think deep down West Virginia feels that they were in that game a little bit more. And I'll tell you something else I just kind of have a feeling about. It's just a gut feeling. I feel like West Virginia feels like Penn State doesn't really respect them as much, that they just think they're going to come in here and, West Virginia's getting all up for this game and it's just kind of a nothing for us. And they're just kind of playing it off a little bit. Again, could be wrong. It's just a feeling that I have. And I think the motivation for some of the guys like a Garrett Green, we interviewed Garnett Hollis Jr., a new cornerback, a couple weeks back. Man, he was fired up. He was ready to go to battle with a lot of the new guys in the secondary. He played Penn State while he was at Northwestern. So it's crazy that we're close in our score, just flip-flopped. But I felt West Virginia was going to get it done a couple months ago. And now here we are shortly before kickoff, and I still feel that way.
Yeah.
But you can't take a big hit on a 3-point loss, a 27-24 prediction to Penn State. I mean,
yeah, I'm not a bit, I'm a guy who tends to think with his head, not his heart, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't usually feel comfortable taking risks. And that, that kind of plays into my logic here. On paper, Penn State should win the game, and I have a hard time getting past that. Even though I've done videos saying I do think West Virginia stacks up talent-wise with them, and more so than people think.
Yeah.
But I still think there's an edge there, especially on defense. I think Penn State's defense is just going to be unbelievable again this year, and I have a hard time getting past that.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it goes back to what you said earlier, turnovers. West Virginia can't afford – they can't shoot themselves in the foot because Penn State is as talented as they are. They can't hurt themselves. So, but I think we would both agree that it's an exciting time for West Virginia, that the fans are as excited. We're excited. I mean, we were kind of texting about this show all day today, just kind of really excited about talking about it. And so it's a good feeling to be this excited and to think that you can be on this level going into the season. It's going to be a fun year, and it'll be interesting to see next week when we recap these games if our keys and our position battles and breakout players and final scores, see how good or bad.
Yeah, it will be interesting. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let us know in the comments, what are your keys of the game? Leave your score prediction down below. Jonathan's got West Virginia winning 28-24. I've got Penn State winning 27-24. So our scores are really close. We just have the teams flipped. Let us know what you think. Let us know what players are you watching and what position battles are you watching. We want to get your thoughts on this too. Not just, we like to tell you our thoughts, but we also want to hear yours. So let us know. We thank you again for tuning into this episode of Gold and Blue Breakdown. I want to give another shout out to our sponsor, Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, your personal injury and medical malpractice attorneys. If you're in West Virginia or Virginia, check them out at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. Thanks for tuning into this episode. We look forward to seeing you next week. Q Country Roads, and have a top shelf day.